The Queen's proposal. The great throne hall of the alien empire glittered with gold, jewels, and strange glowing crystals. Hundreds of nobles sat in long rows, their eyes fixed on the raised throne where the alien queen ruled. She was tall, graceful, and terrifying in her beauty. Her crown looked like a crown of blades, and her eyes burned like cold fire. Every word she spoke was law, and every gesture of her hand could decide the fate of entire worlds. On this day she had summoned someone unusual. Not a noble, not a general, not even a scientist. She had summoned a human. The tall gates opened and the human stepped into the hall. He was not dressed in rich robes or shining armor. He wore simple clothing, travel-worn boots, and a plain belt. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp like steel. Many of the alien nobles laughed at the sight of him. How could such a simple creature stand in the presence of their queen? The queen leaned forward on her throne, her lips curling into a smile that was both mocking and curious. "So this is the human who dares to speak so boldly," she said, her voice carrying across the entire hall. "You are all talk, are you not? Words not strength, claims not proof." The nobles chuckled, their voices filling the chamber like cruel music. Some hissed insults, others whispered bets about how quickly the queen would crush him. The human did not bow. He did not kneel. He simply stood, his eyes fixed on the queen as if she was no different than anyone else. That alone made the crowd uneasy. No one ever looked at the queen like that. With a wave of her hand, an attendant brought forth a golden scroll, bound in red threads and marked with the queen's seal. The parchment glowed faintly with alien script. The attendant placed it before the human and then stepped back in silence. "This," the queen declared, "is the reproductive contract." Her words sent a murmur across the hall. Every noble knew what that meant. A reproductive contract was sacred in their culture. It bound one to serve the queen's bloodline, to ensure her descendants would continue with power and strength. To be offered such a contract was a rare honor, but also a prison. "You, human," the queen continued, her eyes sharp, "have been loud. You claim your species is strong. You claim your will is unbreakable. Prove it then. Sign this contract. Become part of my legacy. Serve my empire not with words, but with your body, your loyalty, your very existence." She leaned back, her smile wide and confident. In her eyes, this was already over. The human would either kneel and sign, or he would die for refusing. Either way, she would prove her point. The hall was silent, all eyes on him. The nobles whispered, "He will kneel. He has no choice." No one dares defy the queen. But the human did not move right away. He studied the scroll. His eyes traced the glowing alien script. His jaw tightened slightly, and for a long moment he said nothing. The silence stretched until it was unbearable. The queen raised a brow. "What is the matter, human? Do you not understand? Shall I explain in smaller words?" Her tone was sharp, mocking. The nobles laughed again, enjoying her cruelty. Still, the human said nothing. Instead, he slowly reached out his hand. Everyone leaned forward. Was he going to sign? Was he going to kneel? His fingers touched the scroll. The glow pulsed brighter as if welcoming him. But then he pulled it off the table. The nobles gasped. What was he doing? The queen narrowed her eyes, her smile fading just slightly. The human held the scroll in both hands. His calm eyes lifted to meet the queen's cold gaze. His voice was quiet, steady, and deadly serious. "You think humans are all talk," he said. "You think we bend, kneel, and obey, but you don't understand us at all." Then, in one swift motion, he tore the sacred scroll in half. The sound of ripping parchment echoed like thunder in the hall. The glowing letters scattered like broken fireflies, fading into nothing. The nobles screamed in outrage. Some leapt to their feet, shouting curses. Others stared in shock, unable to believe what they had just seen. To destroy a reproductive contract was an insult so great it was almost unthinkable. The queen rose slowly from her throne, her expression unreadable. Anger burned in her eyes, but beneath it was something else, something dangerous, curiosity. "You," she whispered, her voice like a blade against stone. "You dare." The human dropped the torn pieces at his feet. He stood tall, unshaken by the shouts or the fury around him. "I dare," he replied simply. The hall erupted into chaos. Guards reached for their weapons. Nobles demanded his execution, and the air itself seemed ready to explode. But the queen lifted one hand and silence fell instantly. She stepped down from her throne, her eyes never leaving him. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Interest. "You think you can stand against me," she said, her voice low. "You think your will is stronger than my empire. Very well, human. You will not die yet. You will prove yourself. You will face trials that no one has survived. And if you fail, your death will be slow." The human did not flinch. "Then let me face them," he said. The queen's smile returned, sharper than ever. "Good. Let us see if you are more than words." And so in that glittering throne hall before the eyes of the entire empire, the stage was set. The queen had given her challenge. The human had made his stand, and the universe itself seemed to hold its breath for what would come next. The throne hall had never been so loud. Alien nobles shouted. Guards slammed their weapons against the marble floor, and the air was thick with outrage. The sacred scroll, the reproductive contract, lay in torn pieces at the human's feet. Glowing symbols that once bound lives and generations had faded into dust. What he had destroyed was not only paper, it was tradition, power, and pride. The alien queen stood at the center of it all. Her tall figure was wrapped in shimmering royal robes, and her crown seemed to blaze with cold fire. Yet for once her smile had vanished. She stared at the human with a silence that was more dangerous than any shout. Her nobles cried out in anger. "Execute him now." He spit on our culture. "No one can tear the queen's word and live." The guards moved forward, weapons ready. Their armor glowed as energy blades hummed to life. But the queen raised her hand and everyone froze. The hall went silent again. Even the flames from the crystal torches seemed to flicker lower. She stepped closer to the human. Her sharp heels echoed across the floor, each step loud in the silence. When she stood just a few feet away, she looked him directly in the eye. "You do not fear me," she said softly. "Strange." The human's voice was steady, not raised, but it carried through the chamber. "Fear doesn't bind me. Contracts don't bind me. I choose my own path." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. No one had ever spoken to the queen like this. The courage or madness was beyond belief. The queen tilted her head, studying him. She had expected him to beg, to apologize, to fall on his knees. Instead, he stood tall as if the fury of an empire meant nothing. For the first time in years, she felt her curiosity sharpen. Who was this man? Why did his eyes burn with such stubborn fire? "You tore the contract," she said, her voice colder now. "That alone should mean your death. But perhaps—" She paused, her lips curling into a slow smile. "Perhaps words are not enough to kill you. Perhaps you deserve a chance to prove what you claim." The nobles gasped. "Your Majesty, no!" cried one of the elders. "He mocked our most sacred bond. Do not honor him with trials, end him here." The queen's gaze flashed like lightning, and the elder fell silent at once. Her word was absolute. None dared challenge her directly. Turning back to the human, she spoke with deliberate slowness. "If you believe humans are more than talk, then you will face my trials. These are tests of strength, wit, and spirit. Trials designed to break even the bravest. Fail and you will die. Succeed," she let the word linger in the air, "and perhaps you will earn something greater than survival." The human's eyes did not waver. "Then let me face them," he said simply. The queen leaned closer, her voice just loud enough for him to hear. "Be careful, human. Many have spoken boldly before me. None have lived to regret it." He did not flinch. "Then I will be the first." For a moment their eyes locked, her cold fire against his steel will. It was not just a challenge. It was a collision of two worlds, two ways of life. Around them the hall was silent again, every noble waiting to see who would bend first. Finally the queen turned away. With a flick of her hand she dismissed the guards. "Take him to the chambers of testing," she ordered. At dawn, the trials begin. The guards obeyed, surrounding the human with their glowing blades. But though they marched him out of the hall, he walked without chains. No fear showed on his face. As he disappeared through the great doors, the nobles erupted once more. Some demanded his blood, others whispered, wondering if perhaps the queen saw something they did not. The hall was filled with voices of anger and doubt, but the queen ignored them all. She returned to her throne and sat slowly, her eyes thoughtful. The pieces of the contract still lay scattered on the floor. For centuries, no one had dared touch such a thing, yet a single human had shredded it without hesitation. Her advisor approached carefully. "Your Majesty, why let him live? He insulted you in front of all." The queen's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Because he is not afraid. because he is either a fool or something far more dangerous. And I want to know which. She leaned back in her throne, her eyes glittering. Tomorrow will tell. The human, meanwhile, was taken down stone corridors into the depths of the palace. Torches flickered along the walls, throwing long shadows. He was locked in a chamber with a single window high above, where the stars could be seen. Alone, he sat on the cold floor. His thoughts were calm, not filled with regret. He knew what he had done. He knew the risk. But to him it was never a question. No paper, no contract, no queen could decide his fate. Only he could. As he looked up at the stars, he whispered quietly, "Trials or not, I'll show them what it means to be human." Outside, the alien city glittered under twin moons. Somewhere in the palace above, the queen sat awake, unable to forget the fire in the human's eyes. For the first time in years, she wondered if her empire had underestimated a species it thought weak. And as the night deepened, the stage was set. At dawn, the first trial would begin. The night passed slowly in the stone chamber where the human was locked. The cold walls carried every distant sound: guards' footsteps, the rustle of banners in the wind, even the faint echo of alien songs from the city outside. But the human did not sleep. He sat with his back against the wall, eyes fixed on the slice of stars visible through the high window. He thought of home, of Earth, of the quiet places where no queen ruled and no one dared to bind a man's freedom with paper or threats. That thought gave him strength. When dawn's first light crept across the floor, his eyes were already sharp, ready for whatever awaited him. The doors opened with a heavy groan. Guards in black armor entered, their glowing blades humming low. "It is time," one of them barked. Chains were offered, but the human refused them. And strangely, after a pause, the guards did not force him. They seemed almost uneasy. He walked freely, unchained, down the long corridors. His steps echoed steady, fearless. The throne hall was even more crowded than before. Nobles filled every seat, their colorful robes shimmering under crystal lights. The air was alive with whispers and cruel laughter. Everyone had come to watch the human break. At the far end, the queen waited on her throne. Her presence filled the hall like a storm held in place. She watched him enter with eyes that missed nothing. For a moment, their gazes locked again, and the hall seemed to grow quieter. The human stopped at the center of the floor. He stood tall, his plain clothes marked with dust, but his spirit unshaken. The queen rose from her throne. Her voice carried with sharp clarity. "Human, yesterday you shredded a sacred contract. You mocked my empire before my nobles. By our law, your death should already be written. But instead, I offer you trials. Survive them, and you may earn the right to walk free. Fail, and your body will decorate the walls of this palace." The nobles roared in approval. Some laughed, certain of his doom. Others shouted wagers on how quickly he would fall. But their noise could not pierce the calm that hung around the human. The queen lifted her hand, and the hall fell silent again. "The trials," she said, "are 3, each one harsher than the last. They are not meant for mortals to survive. They are meant to break spirits. They are meant to prove who is worthy and who is only noise." She stepped down from her throne, her long cloak trailing like a shadow. She walked past him slowly, circling like a predator testing her prey. "First you will face the pit of beasts. Creatures bred only for war. They do not know fear. They do not know mercy. If you survive them, you will face the labyrinth of poison where each step can be your last. And if you crawl out alive..." She paused, her lips curling into a dangerous smile. "Then comes the last trial, one that even my generals whisper about." Her words sank into the crowd, stirring both excitement and dread. None knew the details of the final trial, only that it had ended every challenger's life. The human's voice was steady, low but strong enough for all to hear. "Then let me face the first." The queen stopped before him, standing close enough that he could see the glimmer of strange jewels set in her crown. "So eager," she whispered. "Tell me, human, do you value your life so little?" He met her eyes without flinching. "I value my freedom more." Her smile sharpened. For the second time, she felt something deep inside her stir, a flicker of admiration buried under her fury. But she turned quickly, raising her voice for all to hear. "Very well," she declared. "Let the trials begin. Let the Empire see what this human is made of. By sunset, his bones will lie in the pit," or she let the sentence hang, leaving the hall buzzing with anticipation. The nobles shouted in excitement. The guards saluted. The sound of drums thundered through the hall as the call for the trials began. The human was led away, down twisting corridors and stairways, deeper into the palace's underbelly. With every step, the air grew heavier, hotter. The smell of iron and beasts filled the tunnels. Torches burned against damp stone walls. Finally, they emerged into a massive arena carved into the earth itself. The crowd above filled the stands, roaring like a storm. The pit below was dark, the shadows moving with restless shapes. Growls and hisses echoed from unseen creatures. The guards shoved him forward, but he walked without resistance. He looked into the pit calmly, as if the monsters waiting there were no different than the nobles above. The queen appeared in her high seat overlooking the arena. She raised her hand and silence fell once more. Her voice rang clear. "Behold the first trial. Let the beast taste his courage." The gates below clanged open. From the darkness, massive forms stepped out. Scaled beasts with claws like swords, teeth dripping venom, eyes glowing with hunger. The ground trembled as they moved closer, growling and snapping. The human stood alone in the center. No armor, no weapons. Only his wits, his hands, and the will that had made him tear the sacred contract. Above, the nobles shouted for blood. The queen leaned forward, her eyes locked on him. She had expected fear, maybe trembling, maybe begging. Instead, she saw the same calm steel in his face. He bent slightly, scooping up a broken shard of stone from the arena floor. His grip tightened, his eyes sharp, and under the twin suns rising high above the pit, he whispered only one thing to himself. "Let's begin." The beasts roared, charging forward. The first trial had started. The arena shook with the sound of beasts roaring. Dust rose into the air as claws scraped across stone. The nobles above shouted in excitement, waving banners and throwing coins into the pit as if the fight were already decided. To them, the human was nothing more than prey, but the human stood still. His eyes moved carefully, studying every detail, the shadows, the ground, the positions of the beasts. There were 3 of them, massive creatures with scales harder than metal, tails that cracked the earth when they swung, and mouths filled with dagger-like teeth dripping green venom. The queen leaned forward in her high seat, her eyes sharp. She had expected the human to panic, to run, maybe even to fall to his knees, but instead, he crouched low and scooped up another shard of stone, testing its weight in his hand. The first beast lunged, jaws snapping shut like a trap. The crowd gasped as the human dodged just in time, rolling across the ground and coming up on his feet. The creature's teeth sank into empty air, its head slamming against the stone wall with a loud crack. The nobles laughed, thinking it was only luck, but the queen's eyes narrowed. That move had not been luck, it had been timing. The second beast circled around, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Its claws dug into the dirt as it prepared to strike. The human bent down, grabbed a handful of dust and pebbles, and waited. When the beast lunged, he threw the dirt straight into its eyes. The creature roared in fury, thrashing wildly as it tried to blink away the burning grit. The crowd fell silent for a moment, surprised. The queen's lips curved slightly. Clever, she thought. He fights with nothing yet makes something out of it, but the third beast was already behind him. Its tail whipped forward with terrifying speed. The human barely managed to jump aside, but the strike sent him crashing to the ground. Pain shot through his ribs and blood filled his mouth. The nobles roared in triumph. "It is over," they cried. The queen stayed silent. Her gaze was locked on him. Slowly, the human pushed himself back to his feet. He wiped the blood from his lips and spat it onto the ground. His chest burned. His legs shook, but his eyes did not waver. The beasts circled him now, their growls echoing through the arena. 3 predators against 1 man. The nobles shouted for the kill, their voices a storm above. But the human was thinking, not panicking. He noticed something. The beasts were not smart. They were hungry, yes, but not clever. They chased blindly, their attacks predictable. He could not match their strength, but maybe he could use it against them. The first beast lunged again, snapping its jaws. The human darted aside, leading it straight toward the blinded second beast. They crashed into each other, snarling and clawing in confusion. Dust filled the air as they fought each other instead of him. The crowd gasped. Some nobles shouted in anger, others in shock. The queen's eyes gleamed. "Interesting," she whispered. The third beast roared and charged at him. This time the human didn't dodge away. Instead, he sprinted toward the stone wall of the arena. At the last moment, he leapt aside. The beast's own momentum carried it forward, slamming its massive head into the wall with a bone-cracking impact. The stones cracked, dust rained down, and the creature collapsed, dazed and bleeding. The human grabbed a broken spear left behind from past battles. Half buried in the dirt, its shaft cracked but still sharp enough. He held it tight, breathing hard. His ribs screamed with pain, but his mind was clear. The blinded beast stumbled toward him, roaring in fury. The human crouched low, waited until it was almost upon him, and then drove the broken spear upward into its throat. Green blood sprayed across the ground as the creature shrieked, collapsing in violent spasms. The crowd erupted, half in outrage, half in wild excitement. The nobles who had bet on his death cursed loudly. Others shouted in disbelief. The queen leaned back, her fingers tapping lightly against her throne. For the first time in many years, her heart raced. She had not expected him to last even a few minutes. Yet here he was, standing in the pit, covered in blood and dust, still fighting. But the battle was not over. The first beast, now furious from colliding with the other, turned its rage back on him. It charged like a living mountain. The human barely managed to dodge, the wind of its passing nearly throwing him to the ground. His broken spear snapped in his grip. Breathing hard, he looked around desperately. Then his eyes caught the shattered stones of the wall where the third beast had slammed earlier. He sprinted toward it, ignoring the pain in his ribs. The beast lunged again. At the last moment, the human dove aside, and the monster's massive body crashed into the weakened wall. With a thunderous crack, the stones gave way, collapsing over the beast. Dust and rubble filled the air. When it cleared, the creature lay crushed beneath tons of rock. Silence filled the arena. 2 beasts lay dead. 1 remained, the dazed third beast, blood running down its head from the wall strike. Slowly, the human approached it. His chest rose and fell heavily, every step filled with exhaustion. But his eyes stayed sharp. The beast tried to rise, its claws scratching weakly at the ground. With one last surge of strength, the human picked up a jagged stone and brought it down with all his weight. The beast's roar cut short, and then there was only silence. The arena shook with the sound of thousands of voices screaming at once, some in disbelief, some in admiration, some in fury. The nobles had never seen anything like it. A human, unarmed, untrained in their ways, had defeated the pit's monsters. High above, the queen stood slowly from her throne. Her lips curved into a small, dangerous smile. "So," she whispered, her voice lost beneath the crowd. Not all talk, after all. The human dropped the bloody stone, his chest heaving. He stood in the center of the pit, battered but unbroken. His eyes lifted to meet the queen's once more. And for a brief moment, the two of them stared across the distance as if the rest of the world had fallen away. The first trial was over. And the war between pride and will had only just begun. The arena was still buzzing long after the beasts had fallen. Nobles shouted at one another, their voices sharp with disbelief. Some claimed the human had cheated. Others argued that it had been pure luck. But beneath all the noise, one truth could not be denied. The human had survived. High above, the alien queen sat motionless on her throne. Her eyes were locked on the man standing below. Bloodied but still upright, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. She had seen warriors collapse after lesser fights, yet he remained, tired, wounded, but unbroken. For the first time in years, the queen felt something unfamiliar: doubt. When she had first summoned him, she had thought him arrogant. His calm eyes had seemed like the bluff of a weak creature pretending to be strong. She had wanted to humiliate him, to crush him in front of her court, and prove once more that no one, human or otherwise, could stand before her. But now, after watching him turn beasts against each other with nothing but wit and willpower, she was forced to question her own judgment. As the guards pulled the human out of the pit, the nobles shouted for his death. "It is not enough!" they cried. No human should walk away from the pit alive. Their voices rose like a storm. The queen raised her hand. Silence fell. Her word was final. "Prepare the second trial," she said coldly. The labyrinth of poison. The nobles hissed and murmured, but none dared argue. The labyrinth was infamous. Even trained warriors had perished in its twisting halls. If the human survived the beasts, surely the labyrinth would claim him. Yet as the queen returned to her private chamber, the image of the human's eyes refused to leave her mind. They were not the eyes of a coward. They were not the eyes of someone who bowed to power. They were steady, clear. She sat by the great window of her chamber, staring out at the twin moons over the alien city. Her fingers drummed lightly on the stone sill. Strange creature, she whispered to herself. You should have died. Why didn't you? Her chief advisor entered quietly, bowing low. My queen, the court grows restless. Many believe showing him more trials is dangerous. They say it gives him honor. The queen's lips curved into a sharp smile. Honor? No, his death will silence them. When the labyrinth takes him, they will remember only my power. But her own words rang hollow inside her. For the first time, she wondered, what if the labyrinth did not take him? Meanwhile, in the lower chambers, the human was treated for his wounds. Alien healers, ordered by the queen, cleaned the cuts on his arms and wrapped his ribs in tight cloth. They did not speak to him. To them, he was already dead, just waiting for the labyrinth to finish the job. But the human stayed calm. He sat on the stone bench, breathing slowly, gathering his strength. He remembered every moment of the arena, the roar of the crowd, the weight of the beasts, the way their rage had blinded them. He had used their own fury against them. Now he wondered, what would the next trial demand? He looked at his hands, still stained with green beast blood. They think this is enough to break me, he murmured. They don't understand. Humans don't break. We adapt. That night the queen could not sleep. She walked the halls of her palace, her mind restless. Her people expected her to be certain, unshakable. But the memory of the human tearing her sacred contract burned in her thoughts. The sound of parchment ripping echoed like thunder in her mind. And then the sight of him in the pit, bloodied, coughing, yet still standing tall. She stopped before a mirror, staring at her reflection. Her crown glittered like blades around her head, but for once she felt no pride in it. Instead, she saw her own eyes and the flicker of something dangerous within them. Interest, could it be admiration? No, she told herself quickly. It was only curiosity. Nothing more. Still, doubt gnawed at her. If the human survived the labyrinth, what would that mean? Would it prove that he truly was more than all talk? Would it shake her empire's belief that only their kind could rule? She clenched her fists, her long nails biting into her palms. No, she whispered. He will fail. He must fail. The next morning, the drum sounded again. Nobles gathered, eager to see the second trial. The human was led into the labyrinth's gates. Towering black stone walls twisted into endless paths. Poisonous fog rose from vents in the floor, and deadly plants grew along the edges, their thorns glistening with venom. From her high seat, the queen watched silently as the human stepped inside. Her face was calm, her posture regal, but deep within, her thoughts whispered a truth she could not admit aloud. Part of her wanted him to survive. Part of her wanted to see him prove them all wrong, and that was the queen's greatest fear. The labyrinth had tried to break him. Its poisonous mist burned his lungs. Its twisting paths turned in endless circles, and its hidden traps snapped like jaws at his every step. Yet somehow the human had walked out alive. When he stumbled back into the sunlight, bruised and coughing but still standing, the nobles had fallen into stunned silence. The queen had watched it all. She had seen the human use his bare hands to test the air for poison, break off vines to mark his path, and even carry a wounded alien prisoner out of the maze instead of leaving him to die. That last choice had unsettled her the most. Why would he save a stranger when it could have slowed him, even killed him? Now the final test awaited. The last trial, spoken about in whispers, never in detail. It was not strength. It was not cleverness. It was something crueler, sharper, something designed to break even the hardest hearts. The arena was silent this time. No cheering, no laughing nobles. Only watchful eyes and nervous whispers. Even the air felt heavy, as if the empire itself held its breath. The queen rose slowly from her throne. Her voice rang across the stone walls. You have survived beasts. You have conquered poison. But the last trial is different. It is not a battle of body or mind. It is a test of soul. The human stood in the pit below, his body battered, but his eyes steady. Then give it to me, he said. The queen's gaze hardened. With a wave of her hand, guards brought forward a small figure bound in chains. It was a child, an alien girl, no more than 10 years old. Her large, frightened eyes looked around the arena, tears running down her cheeks. The crowd gasped. The nobles leaned forward, whispering. Some smiled cruelly, already understanding what was about to happen. The queen's voice was sharp. Here's your choice, human. You may walk free, leave the arena alive and unchained. But to do so, you must kill the child. The words struck like a blade. The nobles erupted into noise. Some shouted with excitement, others laughed, knowing the trap was perfect. If he killed the girl, he would live, but he would prove himself a monster. If he refused, he would die here, cut down by the guards. The Queen's eyes locked on him. She expected him to hesitate, to tremble, to finally break. This trial had ended every challenger. No one could carry the burden of such a choice. The guards shoved the child forward. She stumbled, her chains rattling, and fell to her knees before the human. Her voice was small and broken. "Please don't hurt me." The arena was silent again. Thousands of eyes watched as the human stood still, his fists clenched. His chest rose and fell, his breaths heavy. For a long moment, no one knew what he would do. Then slowly he knelt before the child. He placed a hand on her shoulder gently, his voice calm. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." The nobles gasped in outrage. "He refuses," they shouted. "Then kill him now." But the human stood, turning his sharp gaze toward the Queen. His voice was steady, carrying across the arena. "You think this is a trial of me, but it's a trial of you. What kind of empire demands the blood of a child to prove strength?" His words cut deeper than any blade. The nobles fell into silence, shifting uncomfortably. Some looked away, ashamed. Others scowled, unwilling to admit their queen's cruelty. The Queen herself froze. His words struck something she had buried long ago. Memories flashed of her own childhood, of the day she had been forced to watch her brother die in one of these same trials. She had told herself it was necessary, that cruelty built strength. But now, staring at the human shielding the child, her certainty cracked. "Enough," she said sharply, her voice colder than ever. "You choose death, then. Guards." The soldiers moved forward, weapons raised. The crowd leaned in, eager to see the final strike. But before the blades could fall, the human lifted the child into his arms. His voice thundered across the arena. "If you kill me, then know this. Humans don't need contracts or trials to prove their worth. We protect the weak. That's our strength, and no empire can ever take that away." The nobles were stunned into silence. Even the guards hesitated, their steps faltering. The human's words echoed in their hearts in a way no weapon ever had. The Queen stood, her hands gripping the arms of her throne. For the first time, her voice trembled. Why would you risk everything for someone not your own?" The human looked up at her, the child trembling in his arms. His answer was simple, but it struck like lightning. "Because that is what it means to be human." The Queen's heart skipped. She had spent her life believing only power ruled, only fear controlled. But here, in front of her entire empire, one man had defied everything she stood for, and she could not deny the fire in his words. The silence stretched. Guards held their weapons, unsure. Nobles waited, confused. And the Queen? For the first time, she did not know what to command. Her doubt had become something stronger, something dangerous. The last trial was meant to break him. Instead, it had broken her certainty. The arena was silent. Thousands of eyes stared down, waiting for the Queen's command. The human stood in the center, holding the trembling alien child in his arms. His body was broken with wounds, his chest heaving, but his eyes were steady, like a flame that refused to die. The nobles shifted in their seats, their jeweled robes rustling like whispers of doubt. Many of them wanted blood, others wanted silence, but none could speak louder than the image before them, a human protecting a child at the cost of his own life. On the high throne, the Queen gripped the armrests so tightly her nails dug into the gold. She had never been challenged like this, not by generals, not by rivals, not even by her own blood. Yet here stood a man from a weaker race, one she had mocked as all talk. He had torn her sacred contract. He had defeated her beasts. He had survived her labyrinth. And now he had shattered her cruelest trial, not with strength but with mercy. Her heart trembled in a way she hated to admit. The nobles began to shout again. "Kill him! He insults our empire! Strike him down!" But their voices no longer carried the same certainty. Some spoke softer. Some looked away. A few even stared at the human with something dangerous. Respect. The Queen rose slowly from her throne. Her cloak flowed behind her like a dark tide. The entire hall fell silent, waiting for her judgment. She descended the steps, each one echoing like thunder, until she stood face to face with the human once more. Her eyes burned into his. "You should be dead," she said, her voice low. "Every trial was meant to destroy you, yet you stand." The human shifted the child in his arms and met her gaze without fear. I stand because I refuse to kneel. The words cut through her like a blade. For years she had ruled through fear. For years she had believed obedience was strength. But this man showed her something else. A strength that did not come from power but from choice. The queen turned, her eyes sweeping over the nobles. "You all saw it," she declared, her voice echoing across the arena. "A man with no armor, no weapons, no army. And yet he triumphed. Not through cruelty, not through domination, but through will." The nobles stirred, uncomfortable. Some hissed in anger, others bowed their heads, her voice sharpened. "For generations we have said that mercy is weakness. That to rule one must crush and bind. But today this human showed us a truth we cannot deny. Mercy is not weakness, it is a fire that cannot be broken." Gasps rippled through the court. Some nobles shouted in protest, but none dared speak louder than their queen. She turned back to the human. "You tore my contract. You defied my empire, and yet you have earned something greater than survival." The crowd held its breath. The queen lifted her hand and snapped the chains from the child with a gesture. The iron links clattered to the ground. She looked at the girl, then back at the human. "You are free," she said quietly. "Both of you." The arena exploded with voices, some outraged, some cheering, some in disbelief. The human stood still, stunned for the first time. His eyes narrowed. "Why?" he asked. The queen stepped closer, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Because you shattered more than my trials today. You shattered my throne." His brows furrowed. "Your throne?" She nodded. "The empire I built was ruled by fear. But you showed my people something else. If I kill you now, I only prove myself a coward. If I let you live, I prove that even a queen can change." For the first time, her voice trembled, not with weakness but with truth. The human studied her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. He lowered the child gently to the ground, his body finally giving way as he sank to his knees, exhausted. Guards rushed forward, not with weapons, but with hands to support him. The nobles looked on confused. Was this defeat? Or was it something far greater? The queen raised her hand, silencing them all once more. Her voice rang out across the empire. "Let it be known this human is no slave, no toy, no fool. He is a warrior of will. From this day, his name will be remembered, not as a prisoner but as the man who stood against a queen and forced her to see the truth." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others shouted in fury, but none could deny the moment would echo through history. The queen looked back at him one last time. In her eyes there was no longer only curiosity. There was respect, and something deeper she dared not name. As the guards carried him from the arena, the nobles whispered nervously. The empire had changed, the throne itself had been shaken, and all because one human had dared to shred a contract. The queen returned to her throne, but it no longer felt the same beneath her. It was heavier now, as if the weight of his words had settled there forever. She sat tall, her crown gleaming, but inside her heart whispered a truth she could not escape. The empire's greatest trial had not broken him, it had broken her.